Good morning. Last week, we covered the Americans entering World War II with their war in the Pacific against the Empire of Japan. Today, we're going to start Chapter 14, Americans in Europe, North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. I've divided this section up into three parts, so today we're going to cover Part 1, America invades North Africa. The United States is now in the war against Germany. Stalin wants the US and Britain to invade Nazi-controlled Europe and start a second front to take some of the pressure off of the Soviet Union. So in 1942, Churchill and Roosevelt decide to start a second front against Germany. The question was, where will they invade? Now, US Chief of Staff General George Marshall, we'll talk about him a little bit later, and the United States want to invade France. The British felt it was too soon and they should be better prepared. They felt that if they went too soon, it would end in disaster. The British felt invading North Africa would be better to get a foothold first. All right, I'd like to talk about General George C. Marshall now. George Marshall was a graduate of the Virginia Military Institute and a veteran of the First World War. But when World War II comes around, he's risen to the rank of U.S. Army Chief of Staff, which makes him the top American general in the war, and he will be Roosevelt's #1 advisor. After the war, Marshall will become the U.S. Secretary of State. His massive effort to rebuild post-war Europe, especially Germany, was called the Marshall Plan. It was very successful, and he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1953. He is considered one of the greatest Americans of the 20th century. An attack on French North Africa was agreed on. 1, it would clear the Axis forces from North Africa. 2, it would improve naval control of the Mediterranean Sea. And finally, 3, it would allow them to prepare for an invasion of southern Europe in 1943. Now, since it would be a joint US-British invasion, both Churchill and Roosevelt agreed that they needed one overall commander. They chose General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Let me talk about General Eisenhower. He was a West Point graduate. His nickname was Ike, and he would become the Supreme Commander of Allied forces in Europe. Before the war, he served under MacArthur, but the two of them never got along with each other. MacArthur had a very big ego, and Eisenhower was very unassuming. After the war, Eisenhower was elected president in 1952 and then re-elected in 1956. The Allies decided on an amphibious invasion of Vichy-controlled Morocco and Algeria in northwest Africa. There were 125,000 Vichy French soldiers, but the question was, would the Vichy French fight against their allies, their former friends? The Allies hoped that the Vichy French would not fight against them, did everything they could to try to dissuade them from doing so. In the end, the Vichy French do not fight the Allies. This, of course, makes Hitler extremely angry, and he retaliates by invading Vichy France. The Allied invasion of North Africa is codenamed Operation Torch. On November 8, 1942, the Allies land troops in North Africa. The combined Allied British forces are grouped together and called the 18th Army Group. They're commanded by a British general, General Harold Alexander. Landings are a complete surprise, and there's very little resistance by the Vichy French. There were 3 separate invasions, over 60,000 American and British troops. 24,500 U.S. troops led by General George C. Patton land in Morocco. 18,500 U.S. troops land near Oran in Algeria. At Finally, 18,000 US and British troops land near Algiers, also in Algeria. Now, during this time, Rommel and the Afrika Korps, after being defeated at El Alamein, were being chased west into Tunisia by Montgomery and the British Eighth Army. Hitler doesn't want to lose Africa, so he sends more troops to Tunisia, including the 10th Panzer Division with the new Tiger tanks. The Tiger tank was one of the strongest heavy tanks in the war. It had an 88mm gun, which was extremely deadly to Allied tanks, while on the other hand, its armor was so thick that it could not be pierced by the American Sherman tanks. The speed was 26 miles per hour, which was fairly good, but they were very heavy, weighing 63 tons. Plus, they were very expensive to build, so ultimately Germany only built 1,347 of them. The Allies move east across the desert toward Tunisia, while Montgomery moves north from Libya. The Germans and Italians, commanded by Rommel, wait for them in Tunisia. In February, Rommel defeats the U.S. Army at the Battle of Kasserine Pass in Tunisia. It was the first time the American army fights the Germans, and they are totally defeated. It's a disaster for the American forces. Here we see Rommel there along some of German troops driving in a captured U.S. half-track. After the Battle of Kasserine Pass, General Patton is put in charge of the U.S. 7th Army, which are all the American soldiers in North Africa. He's a very aggressive general. In March, Rommel flies back to Germany. He wants to talk Hitler into pulling troops out of Tunisia. Hitler refuses, and Rommel, who is sick, does not return to Africa. Allied air and naval forces cut off the access in Tunisia, allowing no supplies to get to them. And the Allies start pushing into Tunisia. And by March 13th, all Axis forces in Africa surrender. 250,000 men, including the 10th Panzer and a major part of Italy's army. Hitler remains confident of total victory. He places all blame for the defeat on the Italians. But North Africa is a complete disaster for Mussolini. Defeats in North Africa and losses on the Russian front have destroyed most of the Italian army. The French, on the other hand, are totally united behind General de Gaulle. Roosevelt and Churchill meet in Casablanca and make plans. Eisenhower and the Allies next look to invade Sicily. Well, that completes our section on the Americans invading North Africa. Tomorrow we'll look at the invasion of Sicily. Hope you enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.